Mechanic girl gets fired for helping Hell's Angel. What the biker did made everyone. A small-town mechanic girl gets fired for helping a Hell's Angel, just for stopping to fix his bike in the rain. Everyone calls her crazy, says she's risking her life for a criminal. But when that same biker shows up the next day, not to hurt her, but to thank her, everything changes. He's not what the town thinks he is. He's fighting his own demons, a past full of pain, loss, and redemption. And now he wants her help to rebuild more than motorcycles. He wants to rebuild broken lives. But when their new hope burns to the ground and everyone turns against them, she's faced with an impossible choice: walk away like everyone else, or stand by the man the world swore couldn't change. What if the real miracle isn't fixing engines, but fixing hearts? And when grace meets judgment, who will believe in second chances first? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The morning sun crept over Summit Falls, casting long shadows across the weathered sign of Barton's Auto Repair. Mara Jenkins wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a fresh smudge of grease to join the others on her already stained overalls. The rusty pickup truck before her groaned as she tightened the last bolt on its aging engine. "Look at her," came a whisper from the corner of the garage. "Those overalls haven't seen a washing machine in weeks." Mara pretended not to hear Tommy and Rick's snickering from their break by the water cooler. After 5 years at Barton's, their comments about her appearance rolled off her back like water on wax. She focused instead on the satisfying click of her socket wrench as she finished the repair. "My sister could get her some proper clothes," Tommy said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Maybe even teach her how to use mascara." Mara straightened up, her muscles aching from hours bent over engines. Her long brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and yes, her overalls were stained with the honest work of fixing cars. She couldn't help but smile a little. They'd never understand that every grease mark told the story of another problem solved, another vehicle brought back to life. The day stretched long, filled with oil changes and tire rotations. As evening approached, Mara thought about her father waiting at home. Since his stroke 3 years ago, their roles had shifted. Now she was the caretaker, though he tried his best to help around their small house. Her dreams of opening her own shop had been put on hold, tucked away like spare parts on a shelf, waiting for the right moment. The sky darkened early, heavy clouds rolling in from the west. Mara was alone in the garage, finishing up the day's paperwork when she heard it. The distinctive sound of a motorcycle, engine in distress. The noise grew louder, a sputtering roar that spoke of mechanical trouble. Following the sound, she stepped outside into the drizzling rain. Through the gathering gloom, she saw the bike pull over on the highway just past the garage. Its rider, a large figure in black leather, hunched over the handlebars as if carrying a heavy weight. Without hesitation, Mara grabbed her toolbox and walked toward the stranded biker. As she got closer, she could see the extensive tattoos covering his arms where his jacket had rolled up. His face, partially hidden by several days' worth of beard, bore the kind of weathering that came from more than just sun and wind. "Sounds like you might have a fuel line problem," she called out, keeping her voice steady despite the man's intimidating presence. He looked up, surprise flickering across his features. "You know bikes?" "I know engines," Mara replied simply, setting down her toolbox. The rain was falling harder now, but she barely noticed it as she pulled out her phone for light. The man, who shortly introduced himself as Dean Callahan, stood back and watched as she worked. Despite his rough appearance, there was something in his eyes that caught Mara's attention. Behind the exhaustion, she saw a deep sadness, the kind that seemed to have made a permanent home in his gaze. "You've been riding a long time today," she observed, noting the warm engine and the wear on his boots. "Too long," he admitted quietly. His voice was unexpectedly soft, at odds with his hard exterior. Working efficiently in the beam of her phone's flashlight, Mara found the problem and fixed it. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, even in the dim light and rain. When she finished, the engine purred smoothly, all signs of distress gone. Dean reached for his wallet, but Mara shook her head. "No charge," she said firmly. "Just be careful out there. The roads get tricky when they're wet." He stared at her for a long moment, as if trying to understand something. "Why would you help a stranger like me? For free?" Mara shrugged, closing her toolbox. "Because you needed it." The answer was simple, because it was true. Before heading back to the garage, she had one more thought. "Wait here," she said, jogging back to the building. She returned with a thermos. "It's my dad's coffee. He makes it strong enough to wake the dead, but it'll keep you warm." Dean accepted the thermos with careful hands, those same sad eyes now showing a glimmer of something else. Perhaps gratitude or wonder. "Thank you," he said softly. "I'll bring the thermos back tomorrow." "No need," Mara replied, but he was already starting up his bike, the engine's healthy rumble cutting through the rain. When she finally got home, her father was waiting in his favorite armchair, a book open on his lap. He looked up as she entered, reading something in her expression that made him set the book aside. "You're late tonight," he said, his words slightly slurred from the stroke, but full of warmth. Mara hung up her wet jacket and told him about the stranded biker and the borrowed thermos. Her father listened quietly, the wisdom of his years evident in his gentle eyes. "Some men drag storms with them, Mara," he said finally, his voice soft with concern. She smiled, helping him up from his chair. "Sometimes people just need a little kindness, Dad. That's all." As she settled into bed that night, Mara thought about Dean Callahan's eyes, about the pain she'd seen there, and about her father's words. She had no way of knowing that her simple act of compassion would set in motion events that would change not just her life, but the entire fabric of their small town. For now, she was just Mara Jenkins, the mechanic in the stained overalls, doing what she'd always done, fixing what was broken, one piece at a time. The next morning dawned gray and dreary, matching Mara's tired steps as she walked into Barton's auto repair. Her boots squeaked against the freshly mopped concrete floor, and the familiar scent of motor oil and rubber usually brought comfort. But today, something felt off. Hank Barton stood by the office door, his thick arms crossed over his chest. His face was red, never a good sign. The other mechanics huddled near their workstations, pretending to be busy but stealing glances at the unfolding scene. "Jenkins," Hank barked. "My office, now." Mara's stomach tightened as she followed him inside. The small room was cluttered with invoices and old parts catalogs, a decade of business crammed into metal filing cabinets. Hank didn't sit down. Instead, he turned his computer monitor toward her. "Want to explain this?" The grainy security footage showed last night's scene in black and white. Mara could see herself walking out to help Dean, working on his motorcycle in the rain. The camera angle made Dean look even more imposing than he had in person, his leather jacket and bulk casting an ominous shadow. "I was helping someone broken down on the road," Mara said simply. "Helping someone?" Hank's voice rose. "That's a Hell's Angel you let hang around my shop after hours. I know those patches, those colors. Do you have any idea what that looks like for my business?" "He needed help," Mara protested. "His bike was—" "I don't care if his bike was on fire!" Hank slammed his palm on the desk. "This is about bad optics, Jenkins. What do you think people will say when they see Barton's Auto Repair cozying up to bikers? We're a family business. Mr. Barton, I've worked here for 5 years. You know me. Yeah, I thought I did. He shook his head. But this kind of judgment? This is the last straw. Pack up your tools. You're done here. The words hit Mara like a physical blow. You're firing me? For helping someone? For putting my business at risk? For bringing danger to my doorstep? Hank wouldn't meet her eyes now. I need someone who understands reputation matters in a small town. Mara stood, there, her mind racing through all the cars she'd fixed, all the extra hours she'd worked, all the customers who'd specifically asked for her. None of it mattered now. The walk to her toolbox felt endless. She could feel eyes on her as she methodically packed her tools, the ones she'd saved up for, piece by piece. Socket sets, wrenches, the specialized equipment she'd collected over the years. Each one went into her box with mechanical precision while she held back tears. Mara, one of her co-workers started to say, but fell silent under Hank's watchful glare. The drizzle had started again as she walked home, her heavy toolbox pulling at her arms. The thermos from last night was still in her locker. She hadn't even had the chance to retrieve it. 5 years of her life ended because she'd shown kindness to the wrong person. Her father was in his usual spot by the window when she walked in, his crossword puzzle forgotten as he saw her face. Baby girl, what happened? Mara set down her toolbox carefully. Got fired, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Mr. Barton didn't like me helping that biker last night. Oh, Mara. Her father struggled to stand, his good hand gripping his cane. Don't get up, Dad. I'm fine. She managed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Really? Maybe this is good. I can look for something better. Maybe even save up faster for my own shop. But her father saw through the brave front. He'd always been able to read her like one of his beloved books. Come here, he said softly. Mara shook her head, knowing if she accepted his comfort now, she'd break down completely. I need to change. Get out of these work clothes. She escaped to her room, finally letting the tears fall where no one could see them. Her work uniform, the one she'd worn with such pride, felt like it was strangling her now. She changed into old jeans and a sweater, washing the grease from her hands with mechanical motions. The afternoon crawled by. Mara made soup for dinner, more to give herself something to do than from actual hunger. She and her father sat at their small kitchen table, the ticking clock marking each silent moment. The right door will open, her father said finally, his speech careful and measured, the result of months of therapy after his stroke. You're too good at what you do for it not to. Before Mara could respond, a familiar rumble broke the evening quiet. The sound of a Harley, its engine now running smooth and true, grew louder and then cut off in front of their house. Mara went to the window. There, illuminated by the porch light, stood Dean Callahan. He looked different in the gentle evening light, still intimidating with his tattoos and leather, but somehow softer. In his hands, he held what appeared to be flowers, awkwardly wrapped in a clear plastic bag with a gas station logo. Stay here, Dad, Mara said, moving towards the door. When she opened it, Dean shifted uncomfortably, as if unused, to such domestic settings. I brought these, he said, holding out the flowers. And your thermos. He reached into his jacket and produced her father's thermos, cleaned and polished. Thank you, Mara said, accepting both items. The flowers were a mixture of bright daisies and carnations, cheerful despite their humble packaging. I also came to say something else. Dean's voice was quiet but intense. What you did last night. You didn't just fix my bike. You might have saved my life. Those roads, they were slick, and I was running on empty in more ways than one." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've been trying to figure out how to repay you. Not with money, I could tell that's not what matters to you. But maybe with an opportunity." Mara held the awkwardly wrapped flowers, waiting for Dean to continue. The porch light cast shadows across his face, highlighting the tension in his jaw as he gathered his thoughts. "I run a program called Iron Faith," he said finally. "It's a non-profit that helps veterans rebuild themselves by rebuilding motorcycles. We take old bikes, ones most people would call worthless, and we bring them back to life." His eyes met hers. "Just like some of us need bringing back to life sometimes." Mara studied him, noting how his shoulders relaxed as he talked about his work. "And you need a mechanic?" "I need someone who sees potential where others see broken parts," Dean said. "Someone who stops in the rain to help a stranger. The technical skills, those I can find anywhere. But heart?" He shook his head. "That's rare." From inside, her father called out, "Mara, everything okay?" "Yes, Dad," she called back, then turned to Dean. "Where is this workshop?" "The old train depot on Mason Street. Come by tomorrow morning if you want to see what we're about." He handed her a worn business card. "No pressure, just think about it." The next morning, Mara found herself standing outside the abandoned depot. Sunlight streamed through dusty windows, illuminating a space filled with motorcycle parts and half-finished projects. The smell of oil and metal hung in the air, familiar and comforting. Dean emerged from behind a partially assembled Triumph. "You came," he said, a hint of surprise in his voice. "I'm just looking," Mara reminded him, but her eyes were already cataloging the bikes around her. Old Harleys, Indians, even a few vintage Japanese models, all in various stages of restoration. "Of course." Dean led her through the workshop. "We get donations from collectors, junkyards, anywhere we can. Some guys work on the bikes, others build furniture from scrap metal." He gestured to several industrial-style benches taking shape along one wall. As they walked, Mara noticed the men working quietly at different stations. Some bore visible scars, others carried their wounds inside, but all had the same focused determination in their eyes. They acknowledged her with nods or quiet greetings. "Tom over, there." Dean pointed to a man carefully painting pinstripes on a gas tank. "Artillery sergeant, lost his hearing in one ear. Now he's our best detail man. Says the quiet helps him focus." He moved on. "Mike by the welding station was a combat medic. Says putting bikes back together helps him forget about the bodies he couldn't save." A younger veteran was struggling with a carburetor, muttering under his breath. Without thinking, Mara stepped forward. "Mind if I take a look?" The man, barely 25, shrugged and handed it over. Mara examined the part, her fingers finding the problem immediately. "See this jet? It's clogged. That's why your idle's rough." She demonstrated the cleaning technique, explaining each step. Soon, other veterans drifted over, watching as she diagnosed problems and suggested solutions. Her knowledge flowed naturally, and for the first time since losing her job, she felt truly useful. Hours passed like minutes. Mara lost herself in the work, barely noticing when Dean brought her water or when the sun began to set. It wasn't until he touched her shoulder gently that she realized how late it had gotten. "Let me drive you home," he offered. "You can come back tomorrow if you want." The ride home on Dean's bike was peaceful, the evening air cool against her face. But as they turned onto her street, Mara's heart sank. A police cruiser sat idling outside her house. Dean tensed behind the handlebars. As they pulled up, a uniformed officer stepped out of the car, tall, stern-faced, with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Callahan," the officer said, his tone clipped. Interesting coincidence finding you here. Officer Travers, Dean replied quietly. Just giving a friend a ride home. Officer Travers's gaze shifted to Mara, then back to Dean. Remember our conversation about associating with new people? About maintaining appropriate boundaries during your probation? Mara's breath caught. Probation? I'm well within my restrictions, Dean said, his voice tight. Iron Faith is approved programming. Your assault conviction may be 2 years old, Officer Travers continued, but actions have consequences. I'd hate to see any complications arise. Mara watched Dean's face, saw the shame and anger warring there. Assault conviction. The words echoed in her mind, along with her father's warning about men who drag storms with them. Dean started his bike again, not meeting her eyes. I'll see you around, Mara, he said softly, then drove away, leaving her standing between Officer Travers's suspicious gaze and her father's worried face in the window. But as she watched Dean's taillights disappear, Mara remembered the quiet determination in the veteran's eyes, the pride in their work, the way Dean spoke about giving broken things new life. Maybe her father was right about men who brought storms, but maybe some storms carried healing rain. She clutched the garage keys Dean had given her earlier, feeling their weight in her pocket. Despite everything she'd just learned, despite the officer's warnings and her own uncertainty, she felt something she hadn't expected. Hope. Word traveled fast in Summit Falls. By Monday morning, the whispers had already started. Mara felt the stares as she pushed her shopping cart through Miller's grocery. Mrs. Peterson and her Bridge Club friends huddled near the produce section, their voices dropping to dramatic whispers as Mara passed. Did you hear? Working with those bikers now? Ex-convicts, I heard. Such a shame. She used to be such a nice girl. Mara gripped her cart tighter, pretending to study the tomatoes. Her cheeks burned, but she held her head high. The whispers followed her down every aisle. At the checkout, Sally Burton, who'd sat next to her in Sunday school for 15 years, suddenly remembered an urgent errand and abandoned her half-filled cart. The cashier, a teenager Mara had tutored in math last summer, wouldn't meet her eyes. When she got home, her father was waiting at the kitchen table, newspaper spread before him, but clearly unread. Marie from church called, he said quietly. She's concerned about you. Mara unpacked her groceries with careful precision. I'm sure she is. Honey, her father's voice was gentle. I know you want to help people. It's who you are, who your mother was too. But this Dean fellow has paid his debt to society, Mara finished firmly. Like Mom did. The mention of her mother hung heavy in the air. 12 years ago, Sarah Jenkins had gone to prison for assault after pulling Mara's abusive boyfriend off her 16-year-old daughter and pushing him down the stairs. She'd served 18 months. The town had whispered then, too. Her father sighed. Your mother did what she had to do to protect you. But this, working with ex-cons, letting people think... Think what, Dad? That I'm throwing my life away? Mara turned to face him. You always taught me to look for the good in people. That's what I'm doing. She drove to Iron Faith that afternoon, the familiar smell of metal and oil washing away the morning's tension. A young Marine veteran named Caleb was struggling with a torque wrench, frustration evident in the set of his jaw. His left arm ended just below the elbow, and the standard wrench kept slipping. Mind if I show you something? Mara asked, approaching carefully. Caleb's eyes narrowed. I got it. Of course you do, but I've got an idea that might make it easier. She pulled out her phone, showing him pictures of adaptive tools she'd researched. We could modify the grip, add an anchor point here, make it work for you instead of fighting it. Something shifted in Caleb's expression. Surprise, then cautious interest. For the next hour, they worked together, adjusting and testing different grip designs. When they finally got it right, his face lit up with the first real smile she'd seen from him. "Where'd you learn all this?" he asked as they cleaned up. "My mom." Mara smiled, remembering. She always said there's more than one way to fix something, just got to be creative enough to find it. The afternoon passed quickly, filled with the satisfying work of teaching and learning. It wasn't until dusk that Mara stepped outside to lock up and stopped dead. Harsh red letters stretched across the workshop's wall. "Once a criminal, always a criminal." Her hands shook as she took out her phone to document the vandalism. The sound of a motorcycle approached, and Dean pulled up moments later. He killed the engine, staring at the graffiti in silence. Mara watched him carefully. "I'll help clean it up." Dean's jaw was tight, but his eyes remained calm as he turned to her. "They don't have to believe in us," he said quietly. "We'll just show them." Looking at him, at the mix of determination and resignation in his face, Mara thought about her mother, about second chances and redemption, about how sometimes the people society was quickest to judge were the ones who needed support the most. "You're right," she said. "We will show them." Dean raised an eyebrow. "We?" "I'm all in," Mara said firmly. "No matter what they say, no matter the cost." They stood together in the growing darkness, facing the angry red letters that seemed to glow against the wall. But Mara felt stronger than she had all day. Let them whisper, let them judge. Some things were worth fighting for, and she knew in her heart that this was one of them. The early morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of Iron Faith's workshop as Mara organized a newly donated toolbox. Over the past 3 weeks, the abandoned train depot had slowly transformed. Clean workbenches lined the walls, and the once scattered parts now rested in labeled bins. Dean had been working tirelessly, making calls and visiting local businesses. His persistence paid off. Summit Falls Hardware donated basic supplies, and the Methodist Church offered their old folding chairs. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "Look what just came in," Dean called, wheeling in a cart of parts. His face lit up like a kid at Christmas. "Turner's Auto Supply had these collecting dust. Gave us a deal." Mara examined the motorcycle parts with expert eyes. "These will work perfectly for the Sportster we're fixing up for Jimmy." They fell into an easy rhythm, sorting parts and sharing comfortable silence. During lunch breaks, they sat with the veterans, sharing sandwiches and stories. Caleb, who'd been so resistant at first, now showed up early each day, eager to work with his modified tools. One quiet afternoon, as they worked side by side on an old Harley, Dean spoke softly. "Had a brother once, Eli." His hands stilled on the wrench. "He was the good one. Joined the Marines right out of high school. I followed him in, trying to make our folks proud." Mara listened, sensing the weight of his words. "Afghanistan." Dean's voice roughened. "One bad day, one IED. He was gone." He wiped his hands on a rag, more for something to do than necessity. "I came home angry, joined the Hells Angels, thinking I could outrun the pain. Ended up in places darker than I ever thought I'd go." "What changed?" Mara asked gently. "Prison chaplain. Showed me Eli wouldn't want me destroying myself." Dean's eyes met hers. "Found faith again. Got clean. Started dreaming about this place. Somewhere veterans could heal by rebuilding things." Their conversation was interrupted by Tom Wilson, a disabled veteran who'd brought in his Harley for repairs. The bike needed serious work, but by late afternoon, they had it purring like new. "Take her for a test ride," Tom insisted, grinning. "Make sure she runs right." Dean glanced at Mara. Want to come along? The mountain roads wound through golden afternoon light. Mara held onto Dean's waist as they climbed higher, the wind whipping her hair. At the summit, they stopped to watch the sun paint the valley in brilliant oranges and pinks. I've never seen anything so beautiful, Mara breathed. Dean turned to look at her, something soft in his eyes. Her laugh echoed across the hills, free and unguarded for the first time in weeks. The ride back was peaceful, the cooling air carrying the scent of pine and wildflowers. As they pulled up to her house, Mara saw her father sitting on the porch swing, his expression thoughtful. Dean helped her off the bike, his hand lingering briefly on hers. Thank you for today, for everything. After he rode away, Mara joined her father on the swing. He studied her face in the fading light. You know, he said slowly, I've been watching that young man. The way he treats people, the way he's trying to make something good. He squeezed her hand. Good men can come from dark roads, sweetheart. Mara leaned against her father's shoulder, grateful for his understanding. The porch swing creaked gently as they sat together, watching the last rays of sunlight fade from the sky. In the distance, a motorcycle's rumble faded into the gathering dusk, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow. Mara arrived early at Iron Faith the next morning, her tool belt already slung across her hip. The workshop hummed with potential, and she felt a surge of purpose as she laid out her supplies. Today, she'd promised to help Caleb master some basic repairs, and she wasn't going to let him down. She found him hunched over a workbench, frustration etched on his face as he struggled with a standard wrench. His right sleeve hung empty, a silent reminder of what he'd lost. Morning, Caleb, she called softly, not wanting to startle him. He straightened, trying to hide his irritation. Hey, Mara, just trying to... He gestured vaguely at the scattered tools. I've been thinking about that, she said, pulling out a sketch from her back pocket. What if we modified these handles? Create something that works with your strength, not against it. For the next 2 hours, they experimented with different designs. Mara added rubber grips, adjusted angles, and welded custom extensions. When they finally got it right, Caleb's eyes lit up as he easily manipulated the modified wrench. This actually works, he whispered, amazement creeping into his voice. Working side by side, Mara noticed Caleb's shoulders gradually relaxing. As they tackled an old carburetor, he began talking, hesitantly at first, then with increasing openness. We were on patrol, he said, his voice distant. Standard route we'd done dozens of times. I was point man. Should have seen the signs. His hand trembled slightly on the wrench. Caleb, Mara said gently, you can't... 3 of them died because I missed something. The words burst out of him. Rodriguez, Martinez, Cooper, gone in seconds. And here I am, just missing an arm. Mara set down her tools and faced him directly. Listen to me. Those scars you carry, the physical ones and the ones nobody can see, they're not marks of failure. They're proof you survived. Proof you're still here, still fighting. Caleb's eyes glistened, but he nodded slowly. The conversation was interrupted by Dean's arrival, carrying a stack of flyers. Open garage day, he announced, passing them around. Time to show the town what we're really about. They spent the afternoon preparing the workshop, cleaning tools, and arranging finished projects. String lights were hung across the ceiling, and fold-out tables appeared along one wall. The veterans polished their restored bikes until they gleamed. When evening came, the first visitors arrived cautiously, mostly curious neighbors and a few church members. Mara moved among them, explaining projects with infectious enthusiasm. She showed Mrs. Thompson, her former Sunday school teacher, how Caleb had modified tools to work one-handed. She demonstrated to Mr. Peterson, the hardware store owner, the precision of their restoration work. "This is quite impressive," a familiar gruff voice said behind her. Mara turned to find Hank Barton inspecting a freshly restored Triumph. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes tracked every detail of the workmanship. "Thank you," she replied steadily. Hank nodded once, then walked the length of the workshop, taking everything in. He left without another word, but Mara caught the slight nod of respect he gave Dean on his way out. As darkness fell, the atmosphere shifted from showcase to celebration. Someone fired up a portable grill, and soon the air filled with the smell of burgers and the sound of laughter. Veterans who usually kept to themselves were sharing stories and jokes. Music played from an old radio, mixing with the conversations and occasional rev of an engine. Caleb demonstrated his modified tools to an impressed group of visitors, his earlier darkness replaced by quiet pride. Even the most skeptical townspeople seemed won over by the genuine camaraderie and skill on display. Under the warm glow of the string lights, Mara felt a deep sense of belonging. This was what she'd been looking for, not just fixing engines, but helping rebuild lives. As the crowd began to thin, Dean approached her, helmet in hand. "Ever ridden a motorcycle?" Mara shook her head, eyeing his restored Harley with a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Want to?" He held out a spare helmet. "She's running smooth after all your work on her." Mara hesitated, her father's cautious voice echoing in her mind. But something else whispered louder, a voice that sounded like freedom. "Yes," she said, taking the helmet. Dean showed her how to mount safely, where to hold on. The engine rumbled to life beneath them, powerful and steady. As they pulled out of the workshop, Mara wrapped her arms around Dean's waist, feeling the vibration of the bike through her whole body. The wind whipped through her hair where it escaped the helmet, carrying away all her doubts and fears. Streetlights blurred past as they cruised through the quiet town. For these few precious moments, she wasn't the mechanic who got fired, or the daughter carrying too many responsibilities. She was just Mara, flying free under the stars. The morning sun painted Summit Falls in golden light as motorcycles began gathering outside Iron Faith. What started as a trickle soon became a steady stream of riders, some on gleaming cruisers, others on well-loved classics. Mara stood beside Dean at the workshop entrance, watching in amazement as more than 50 bikes filled the parking lot. "I can't believe how many people showed up," she whispered, her clipboard trembling slightly in her hands. Dean smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Word spreads, especially when it's for a good cause." The Faith Ride for Veterans banners fluttered in the breeze as townspeople arrived on foot, carrying donation envelopes and wearing supportive smiles. Children pointed excitedly at the motorcycles, while their parents chatted with the veterans. Caleb approached, wearing his new prosthetic arm proudly. "The registration table's almost full," he reported. "We've already collected $3,000 for the prosthetics fund." Mara watched as familiar faces from town mingled with the bikers. Mrs. Peterson from the bakery handed out free muffins. The hardware store owner discussed custom tools with some veterans. Even Pastor Mike had shown up on his old Honda Goldwing, his clerical collar visible beneath his leather jacket. A familiar truck rumbled into the lot. Hank Barton stepped out, carrying a heavy toolbox. He walked straight to Dean, his expression serious but softened. "These belonged to my father," he said, setting down the box. "Good tools should be used by good hands." He glanced at Mara. "Both of you. You're doing something special here." Dean accepted the tools with a respectful nod. Thank you, sir. They'll help a lot of people. As Hank moved away, Mara noticed his Barton's Auto Repair jacket had an Iron Faith pin attached to the collar. The ride itself was a sight to behold. Dean and Mara led the procession through Summit Falls, their bikes gleaming in the midday sun. Behind them, veterans and townspeople rode side by side, their engines creating a thunderous symphony of purpose. People lined the streets, waving and cheering. Outside the diner, the usual morning coffee crowd stood and applauded. Even old Mrs. Winston, who complained about everything, wiped tears from her eyes as the veterans rode past. A photographer from the Summit Falls Gazette captured shot after shot. "Could you two lead another pass?" he called to Dean and Mara. "The light's perfect." As they circled back, Mara couldn't help grinning. The wind whipped her hair beneath her helmet, and beside her, Dean's smile was as bright as she'd ever seen it. In that moment, the town's old judgments seemed to melt away like morning frost in sunshine. They ended the ride back at Iron Faith, where tables groaned under potluck dishes and donated refreshments. Veterans shared stories with curious locals. Children sat on parked motorcycles while proud owners explained the basics of two-wheeled safety. As evening approached and the crowd thinned, Mara and Dean worked side by side, cleaning up and counting donations. The final tally exceeded their wildest hopes. $7,523, Mara announced, double-checking her math. "Dean, this will fund 3 new prosthetics and 6 months of counseling services." The workshop felt peaceful in the fading light. Tools hung neatly on their boards, bikes waited patiently for tomorrow's work, and the day's success hung sweet in the air. Dean turned to her, his expression soft. "Thank you, Mara," he said quietly, "for believing in this, in me, when nobody else would." As she reached for another stack of papers, their hands brushed. A small touch, but it sent warmth spreading through her fingers and up her arm. Their eyes met, and for a moment the workshop seemed to hold its breath. The spell broke when Caleb called from outside, needing help securing the last of the folding chairs. They moved apart, but something had shifted, like a key turning in a long-stuck lock. That night, Mara fell asleep with hope burning bright in her chest, but her peace was shattered by the violent wail of sirens cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. She jolted awake, her heart pounding as red and blue lights flashed through her bedroom window. She threw on clothes and ran outside. The sirens' screams led her toward Iron Faith, and even from blocks away, she could see the orange glow painting the sky. Her legs pumped faster, carrying her through empty streets as smoke began to sting her eyes. The workshop was engulfed. Flames roared through the roof, consuming the wooden beams like hungry demons. The Iron Faith sign, hand-painted with such care, curled and blackened in the inferno's breath. Fire trucks surrounded the building, their hoses arcing water into the blaze. But it was too late. Months of work, dozens of projects, thousands of hours of hope, all of it vanished into the smoke that billowed thick and black against the lightening sky. Mara stood frozen, watching as walls that had sheltered so much healing collapsed in a shower of sparks. The tools Hank had donated, the adaptive equipment they'd designed, the bikes they'd restored, all reduced to ash and twisted metal. The sign finally gave way, falling into the flames with a crash that felt like it shook the whole town. Iron Faith disappeared into the inferno, leaving only the approaching dawn to illuminate the destruction of everything they'd built. Dawn crept over Summit Falls, painting the smoking ruins of Iron Faith in harsh gray light. Yellow police tape fluttered in the morning breeze, marking off what remained of their dreams. The acrid smell of burnt rubber and melted metal hung heavy in the air. Fire Marshal Johnson walked the perimeter, his face grim as he took photographs and collected samples. Mara watched from behind the tape, her arms wrapped tight around herself against the morning chill. She'd been there since the first flames, watching helplessly as their workshop burned. "Miss Jenkins?" The fire marshal approached, notebook in hand. "We've found some concerning evidence, multiple points of origin, signs of accelerant." Mara's stomach dropped. "You think someone did this on purpose?" "We can't rule out arson at this point." He glanced at his notes. "Insurance company's been notified. They'll conduct their own investigation." Within hours, social media lit up like the fire itself. Accusations spread faster than the flames had. Ex-con burns down his own shop for insurance money. Once a criminal, always a criminal. Knew that biker gang would bring trouble. Mara refreshed the fundraising page they'd created just yesterday. The donation total that had given them so much hope now showed dozens of refund requests. Their $7,523 dwindled to nothing as people rushed to distance themselves. Officer Travers arrived mid-morning, his cruiser pulling up beside the crime scene tape. He walked straight to where Dean stood surveying the damage. "Mr. Callahan." Travers's voice carried across the parking lot. "We need you to come down to the station, answer some questions." Dean's face remained calm, but Mara saw his hands clench. "I didn't do this, Mark." "That's Officer Travers." He pulled out his handcuffs. "And we'll sort that out downtown." "Wait." Mara stepped forward. "Dean was home all night. He wouldn't destroy everything we've built." Travers barely glanced at her. "Ma'am, this is a police matter. Mr. Callahan's parole agreement requires his full cooperation." As they led Dean away, Mara ran to her truck. She drove through town, stopping at the church, the diner, anywhere people gathered. She told them about the veterans they'd helped, showed pictures of their work, pleaded for someone to listen. But doors closed in her face. People looked away or shook their heads. "He seemed so nice," Mrs. Winston said sadly. "But you know how these ex-cons are. They can't help themselves." By afternoon, Mara's voice was hoarse from arguing. She sat in her truck outside the county jail, gathering courage. The visiting room was cold and sterile, all concrete and plexiglass. Dean looked tired when they brought him in, but his eyes softened when he saw her. They both reached for the phones at the same time. "Are you okay?" Mara asked. Dean nodded. "They can't hold me long. No real evidence." He paused, studying her face. "But once they clear me, I'm leaving town." "What? No, you can't." "Mara." His voice was gentle. "You deserve a quiet life, a good life, not one that's haunted by my past. That's not your choice to make." She pressed her hand against the glass. "You're not the same man you were." Dean placed his palm against hers, separated by inches of plexiglass. "And you're not the same woman you were when we met," he said softly. "Exactly." Tears threatened, but she held them back. "So don't you dare run away now." The guard called time. Dean stood, his hand lingering against the glass. "Thank you for believing in me," he whispered. Then they led him away. The drive home felt endless. Mara's mind raced with possibilities, plans, anything to fix this. She pulled into her driveway as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across her father's garden. He was waiting in his usual chair on the porch, an old shoebox in his lap. When she sat beside him, he pulled out a faded photograph. "Your mother," he said, passing it to her. "The day she went to court." Mara remembered. Her mother had stood tall that day, accepting responsibility for protecting her daughter from an abusive boyfriend. The judge had called it assault, but Mara's father had called it love. "She believed the same thing you do," her father said quietly. That light can come from anyone, if someone stands beside it. Mara traced her mother's face in the photograph. People change, don't they, Dad? They do. He covered her hand with his. If they're given the chance, and if someone believes in them enough to help them believe in themselves. Night settled over Summit Falls, but Mara sat on the porch long after her father went inside. The photograph lay in her lap, her mother's determined expression a mirror of her own. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new chances to fight for what she believed in, for who she believed in. She wasn't giving up, not on Dean, not on Iron Faith, not on the power of second chances. Sometimes the brightest light came from the darkest places, if someone was brave enough to stand beside it and help it shine. Mara couldn't sleep. The digital clock on her nightstand blinked 3:15 in the morning as she sat at her desk, surrounded by stacks of paper and her father's old address book. Her laptop glowed in the darkness, inbox full of desperate emails to every veterans organization and church within 100 miles. Dear Pastor Roberts, she typed, fingers flying across the keyboard. Iron Faith isn't just a workshop. It's hope with a wrench in its hand. She'd been at it for 3 nights straight. During the day, she visited local businesses, telling their story until her voice grew hoarse. Most people turned away, muttering about Dean's past. But Mara refused to let their doubt extinguish her determination. The sun was rising when Caleb showed up at her door, his good arm laden with design supplies. Got your message? He said, managing a tired smile. Let's make some noise. They spread materials across her kitchen table, paper, markers, and Caleb's laptop. Together they designed flyers for what Mara called Faith Rides On, a community rally to rebuild Iron Faith from the ashes. It's got to be big, Caleb said, adjusting the design with his remaining hand. Something they can't ignore. Mara nodded, pushing her untouched coffee aside. We need a space first, somewhere visible. That afternoon, she drove to Barton's Auto Repair. Her hands trembled slightly as she parked, remembering the day Hank had fired her. But Iron Faith needed this, needed him. Hank was under a car when she walked in. He slid out, wiping his hands on a rag, his expression unreadable. Mr. Barton, Mara started, standing straight. I need to ask you something. He listened as she explained her plan, his weathered face growing thoughtful. When she finished, silence filled the garage. You really believe in this Dean fellow, don't you? He finally asked. With all my heart. Hank sighed, running a hand through his gray hair. The back lot, he said. It's yours for the rally, but Mara? His eyes met hers. Don't make me regret this. The next days were a blur of preparation. Mara and Caleb printed hundreds of flyers, plastering them across town. They created social media posts, made phone calls, and visited every business that would listen. But responses were slow. People crossed the street when they saw them coming. 7 people, Caleb reported one evening, checking their sign-up sheet. And 3 of those are my VA buddies. Mara refused to give up. She spent another night writing emails, her father quietly bringing her sandwiches she barely touched. When exhaustion finally forced her to rest, she dreamed of empty lots and silent engines. The morning of the rally dawned cool and clear. Mara stood in her driveway at 6:30, clutching a thermos of coffee, trying to prepare herself for disappointment. Then she heard it, the distant rumble of motorcycles. They came in waves. First, the veterans from Iron Faith, Caleb leading them on his modified bike. Then locals on everything from Harleys to scooters. Pickup trucks loaded with tools and lumber. Cars filled with volunteers. Pastor Roberts pulled up in the church van, tools rattling in, the back. The Lord works in mysterious ways, he said, hugging Mara, sometimes through grease-stained hands. By 8 o'clock, Barton's back lot was transformed into a construction site. Veterans worked alongside townspeople, raising walls and installing windows. Women from the church served breakfast from folding tables. Children helped paint signs. Hank appeared mid-morning, watching from the sidelines, until Caleb called him over to help with the electrical work. Soon, he was directing volunteers, his gruff voice softening as he taught them proper technique. The sound of hammers filled the air, punctuated by laughter and conversation. Stories were shared over sandwich breaks, veterans opening up about their struggles, townspeople listening with new understanding. What had started as a rebuilding project was becoming something more, a bridge between two worlds. Mara moved through it all, coordinating teams, solving problems, her heart swelling with each small victory. She watched Caleb teaching a group of teenagers how to use his adapted tools, their faces shining with admiration. She saw her pastor working alongside a tattooed veteran, their differences forgotten in shared purpose. The whispers that had haunted the town were being drowned out by the sound of community coming together. Faith wasn't just riding on, it was being rebuilt, one nail at a time, in the hearts of everyone present. As the morning stretched into afternoon, Mara took a moment to stand back and watch. The new Iron Faith was taking shape, bigger, stronger, and supported by more hands than she could have imagined. It wasn't just Dean's dream anymore, or even hers. It belonged to all of them now. The weeks passed in a blur of activity, as Iron Faith rose again, stronger than before. Mara arrived each morning before sunrise, checking every detail with meticulous care. The smell of fresh lumber and paint filled the air, replacing the lingering scent of ash and smoke. "These junction boxes need to be rewired," she called out to the electrical team one morning, her clipboard covered in notes. Everything has to be perfect this time. She'd learned more about construction in the past month than she'd ever expected. While engines and motorcycles were her first love, she now understood the importance of every nail, every wire, every foundation stone. The veterans worked alongside professional contractors, learning new skills as they rebuilt their sanctuary. Caleb had become her right-hand man, organizing supplies and keeping morale high. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he told her one afternoon, watching her triple-check the electrical plans. "I have to," she replied, wiping sweat from her forehead. "We can't let this happen again." The breakthrough came on a quiet Tuesday morning. The fire marshal called Mara personally, his voice tired but relieved. "We've completed our investigation," he said. "It wasn't arson, Ms. Jenkins. The fire started in an old outlet in the east wall, faulty wiring that probably dated back to the building's train depot days." Mara sat down hard in her father's kitchen chair, tears streaming down her face. Her father squeezed her shoulder as she listened to the details, how the old wiring had slowly deteriorated, how the recent increased usage had finally caused it to fail. Natural causes, not sabotage, not Dean. The news spread through Summit Falls like wildfire, but this time the whispers carried a different tone. Guilt replaced suspicion. People who had turned away now approached Mara in the grocery store, offering donations and apologies. "We should have known better," Mrs. Peterson from the church said, pressing a check into Mara's hand. "Dean's done nothing but good since he came here." Hank Barton showed up one morning with 3 of his mechanics. "Got some guys here who know their way around electrical systems," he said gruffly. "Proper ones this time." The town's transformation amazed Mara. People who had once crossed the street to avoid her now stopped to ask how they could help. Local businesses donated materials. The diner started delivering free lunches to the construction site. Then came the morning they'd all been waiting for. Mara was up on a ladder, helping paint the new sign, when she heard the familiar rumble of Dean's Harley. Her heart leapt as she turned to see him pull into the lot, his eyes wide with disbelief. The veterans noticed first. Tools clattered to the ground as they rushed to greet him. Caleb reached him first, pulling him into a one-armed hug. "Welcome home, brother." Dean stood frozen, taking in the scene. The nearly completed building, bigger and better than before. The mix of veterans and townspeople working side by side. The new sign proudly declaring Iron Faith in bold letters. Mara couldn't wait any longer. She scrambled down the ladder, not caring about the sawdust coating her clothes or the paint in her hair. Their eyes met across the lot, and suddenly she was running. Dean caught her in his arms, lifting her off her feet. She could feel him trembling slightly as he held her close. "I can't believe this," he whispered. "How did you—" "Told you we'd show them," Mara whispered back, her voice thick with emotion. She pulled back just enough to see his face, to watch the wonder in his eyes as he surveyed their rebuilt dream. The veterans gathered around, each eager to show Dean their contributions. They led him through the building, pointing out improvements, the new workshop space, the dedicated counseling room, the bigger garage doors. In the main area, Dean stopped, his hand resting on a half-finished motorcycle. "This place," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "It was always about my past, about proving I could make up for my mistakes." He looked around at the faces watching him. Veterans, townspeople, Mara. "But now I see it's bigger than that. It's about everyone who needs a second chance. Everyone who's trying to rebuild something broken." Mara slipped her hand into his, feeling the strength in his grip. Around them, the sounds of construction continued. Hammers pounding, saws buzzing, voices calling back and forth. But under it all was something new. Hope, building as surely as the walls around them. The new Iron Faith wasn't just a building rising from ashes. It was proof that faith, love, and determination could overcome any obstacle. That sometimes it takes a whole community to believe in second chances. And that even in the darkest moments, light finds a way to shine through. The morning of Iron Faith's grand reopening dawned bright and clear. Multicolored banners fluttered in the gentle breeze, while classic rock music drifted from speakers mounted near the freshly painted entrance. The parking lot gleamed with rows of perfectly polished motorcycles, each one reflecting the early autumn sunlight like mirrors. Mara stood back, taking it all in. Volunteers had worked through the night, hanging strings of lights and arranging chairs for the ceremony. The smell of fresh coffee and donuts wafted from a table near the entrance, where church ladies chatted with leather-clad bikers as if they'd been friends for years. "Can't believe this is really happening," Caleb said, coming to stand beside her. His adaptive tool belt, the one they'd designed together, hung proudly at his hip. "Remember when we started? Just a bunch of broken bikes and broken people?" Mara squeezed his shoulder. "Look at you now, leading the restoration team, teaching others." "Thanks to you," he replied, then grinned. "Speaking of restoration, wait till you see what we've done with the Phoenix bike." The crowd began gathering around 10 o'clock. Town officials in pressed suits mingled with veterans in leather vests. Local reporters set up cameras while children darted between parked motorcycles, their parents calling after them. Mara helped her father from the car, making sure his wheelchair was comfortable before positioning him in the front row. "You've done good, sweetheart," he said, patting her hand. "Your mother would be so proud." Mayor Thompson stepped up to the podium at exactly 11 o'clock, his silver scissors gleaming. "Today," he announced, "we celebrate more than just the reopening of a business. We celebrate the power of community, the strength of second chances, and the triumph of faith over fear." Dean stood nearby, looking uncomfortable in a clean button-down shirt, though he'd refused to remove his leather vest. His hands fidgeted with the speech cards in his pocket. When the mayor called him forward, Mara gave him an encouraging nod. "I'm not much for speeches," Dean began, his deep voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "When I first came to Summit Falls, I was running from my past. Thought I could outride it, like I'd outridden everything else." He paused, looking out at the faces before him. "Instead, I found something I never expected. Grace. Not just from God, but from people. From a mechanic who fixed my bike in the rain and never asked questions. From veterans who trusted me to help rebuild their lives. From a town that learned to see beyond mistakes to possibility." Mara felt tears prickling her eyes as Dean continued, his voice growing stronger. "Iron Faith isn't about me anymore. It's about service. To our veterans, our community, and anyone who needs help finding their way back to hope. Every bike we restore is a testament to what broken things can become when given a chance." Applause erupted as the mayor stepped forward with the scissors. The red ribbon rippled in the breeze. "To new beginnings," he declared, and with a swift snip, Iron Faith was officially reborn. As people began filing inside for tours, Caleb wheeled out their surprise, the Phoenix bike. The restored Harley gleamed like new, its chrome pipes and custom paint job drawing gasps of appreciation. But what really caught everyone's attention was the subtle Phoenix design airbrushed along the tank, rising from flames in shades of gold and crimson. "This bike survived the fire," Caleb explained to the crowd. "We restored it as a symbol. No matter how bad things look, there's always hope for renewal." The afternoon flew by in a blur of congratulations and conversations. Mara lost count of how many hands she shook, how many stories she heard from people wanting to volunteer or bring in bikes for restoration. Her father beamed with pride as person after person stopped to thank him for raising such a remarkable daughter. As the sun began to set and the crowd thinned, Dean found Mara in the workshop. She was wiping grease from her hands, having just shown a young veteran how to adjust his bike's carburetor. The string lights overhead cast a warm glow across the tools and workbenches. "Got a minute?" Dean asked softly. Mara nodded, following him to the quiet corner where they'd first planned Iron Faith's resurrection. The sound of laughter and music drifted in from outside, but here, it was just them. "I need to tell you something," Dean said, running a hand through his hair. "These past months, watching you fight for this place, for the veterans, for—" He swallowed hard. "For me. You've shown me what real strength looks like, what real faith looks like." Mara's heart thundered in her chest as Dean took her hands in his. "I've fallen for you, Mara Jenkins, hard, but you deserve someone who can give you a quiet life, not someone who—" "Don't," Mara interrupted, squeezing his rough hands. "Don't you dare try to protect me from yourself." She reached up, touching his cheek. "Maybe my light was meant to shine here, with these veterans, with this work." She smiled softly. "With you." Dean's eyes glistened as he pulled her close. They stood there, holding each other, neither savior nor sinner, but two people who had found strength in each other's brokenness and beauty in each other's grace. Outside, the Phoenix bike gleamed under, the string lights, its metallic wings catching the last rays of sunset, a testament to the power of faith, love, and the endless possibility of new beginnings. The autumn breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves and fresh oil through Summit Falls. 6 months had passed since Iron Faith's grand reopening, and the changes in the small town were remarkable. What had started as one man's dream of redemption had blossomed into something far greater. Iron Faith's garage doors stood open every day from sunrise to sunset. The once abandoned train depot now buzzed with activity. Young apprentices in navy blue coveralls worked alongside veterans, learning not just about engines but about life, resilience, and the power of second chances. Mara watched from the office doorway as 18-year-old Sarah, their newest trainee, carefully dismantled a carburetor under Caleb's patient guidance. The young woman's determined expression reminded Mara of herself at that age, desperate to prove she belonged in a world of engines and grease. "Remember," Caleb explained, his prosthetic arm steady as he pointed to different components. "Every part has its purpose. Just like people, sometimes they just need someone to help them work right again." The therapy workshops had become a cornerstone of Iron Faith's mission. 3 times a week, veterans gathered in the converted break room, sharing stories over coffee and pastries donated by the local bakery. Some spoke of battlefield trauma, others of the struggles of civilian life. But here, surrounded by tools and the gentle rumble of engines, healing happened naturally. Dean had installed a small apartment above the garage, transforming the dusty storage space into a cozy home. The morning sun streamed through industrial windows, warming the exposed brick walls. Their bed faced east, and Mara loved waking to golden light and the familiar scent of Dean's coffee mixing with the mechanical aromas from below. Their mornings followed a comfortable routine. Dean would wake first, brewing coffee strong enough to wake the dead, as Mara teased him. She'd join him on their small balcony, watching the town come alive. They'd share quiet conversations about upcoming projects, veterans needing extra support, or simply comfortable silence broken only by the chirping of birds. The town's economy had seen an unexpected boost from Iron Faith's success. The steady stream of veterans and customers brought business to local shops and restaurants. Even Hank Barton, Mara's former boss, had become a regular supporter, often referring complicated repairs their way. "Never thought I'd say this," he admitted one day, watching Dean teach a group of teenagers about proper tool maintenance. "But you two built something special here." The transformation wasn't just in the business. Mara saw it in Dean's eyes, in the way his shoulders gradually relaxed, how his smile came more easily. The weight of his past seemed lighter now, carried by the community that had learned to see him as he truly was, not an ex-con, but a man of faith and purpose. Their Sunday afternoon rides became sacred tradition. After church, they'd take the Phoenix bike into the hills, its restored engine purring like a contented cat. The custom paint job still drew admiring glances, the Phoenix rising from flames now a symbol of hope throughout Summit Falls. On this particular Sunday, as autumn painted the hills in shades of amber and gold, they followed their favorite route up to Carter's Ridge. The lookout point offered a perfect view of the town below, including the spot where Iron Faith had once burned. Now, the new building stood proud, its windows gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Dean cut the engine, and they sat together on a weathered bench, shoulders touching. The setting sun painted everything in warm light, including the small silver cross that now hung from Dean's neck, a gift from Mara's father on their 6-month anniversary of running Iron Faith together. "Remember that first night?" Dean asked, his voice soft with memory. "When you fixed my bike in the rain?" Mara smiled, leaning against him. "You looked like trouble." "I was trouble," he chuckled, then grew serious. "Never told you this, but I was planning to leave town that night. Just keep riding until, I don't know, until I outran myself, I guess. What made you stay?" Dean turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the golden light. "You did. Not just fixing my bike, though that was something. It was..." He paused, searching for words. "It was how you looked at me, like I was worth helping, worth saving." Mara reached for his hand, feeling the familiar calluses and scars. "We were both broken machines," he continued softly. "But God rebuilt us, used us to help rebuild others." Below them, the new Iron Faith sign caught the last rays of sunlight. The words, Second Chances Rebuilt Here shone clearly, a beacon for anyone needing hope. The workshop lights were already on, preparing for tomorrow's veterans meeting. Mara leaned her head against Dean's shoulder, breathing in the scent of leather and autumn air. For years, she'd struggled to find her place, the girl with grease on her hands, the daughter of a stroke survivor, the mechanic who cared too much. Now, watching the town she'd grown up in transform into a place of healing and second chances, she finally understood. This was where she belonged. Not just in Summit Falls or at Iron Faith, but here, beside a man who understood that broken things could be beautiful, helping others find their way back to hope. Every repair they made, every life they touched, was a testament to the power of faith, love, and the endless possibility of new beginnings. The sun sank lower, painting the sky in brilliant golds and purples. Dean started the Phoenix bike's engine, its steady rumble a familiar comfort. As they rode back down toward Iron Faith, Mara held tight to the man she loved, grateful for every twist in the road that had led them here, to this place where faith and second chances rebuilt not just machines, but hearts. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.